I'm going to try and be quick about this so that we can save some time. I can give you something to expect, which is the fact that you've got a very, very diverse and rich set of panelists who are going to be able to speak to so many areas around infrastructure and power. So I would quickly say this. Looking at infrastructure and power, they're like enablers for growth. We've all been talking about the investment opportunities, and some of these things, can we have one house, please? Please, can we, so that we can use this 20, 25 minutes very well. Okay, so infrastructure is supposed to be something that accelerates growth and development. Power is an enabler for any business in any jurisdiction. These are two key challenges that we faced in Nigeria. At the end of the day, if we don't fix some of these things, we're not going to realize the huge opportunities that Nigeria portends. Today, I've got with me 5 very versatile individuals who've had very good track record in this area, and so we do have a lot to pick up from them. To my extreme is Robin, and he has over 40 years experience in ports infrastructure, development, and financing. And the connectivity that's required to drive the continent, and Nigeria in particular, rests on us being able to have efficient ports and efficient supply chain logistics. Robin will be talking to us a lot about that. And next to him, we have Chinua. Chinua is the CEO of InfraCredit. He is one of the pioneer people who's been able to do some very interesting structuring as far as credit enhancement is concerned. He was also, I think, a pioneer member of the team for Garanco. And so he's going to be sharing some of the things that they've been able to do to de-risk investment in both power and infrastructure in Nigeria. Thank you. And then next to him, we have William. William has done quite a bit as far as off-grid clean energy is concerned. They've been able to do off-grid solutions to power provision in Africa, in Nigeria in particular. And just the other day, was it this morning, we were talking about what they've been able to do in even remote areas in Nigeria, and he'll be sharing some of his experiences and how this is also a very credible investment opportunity for us to look into. And next to him, we have Doye. Doye has very interesting track record in both the capital markets, financial advisory, the telecommunications, and more recently, in innovative energy solutions. So he'll be sharing some things. He's the CEO of Zola Electrics. And then, last but not the least, we've got with us, just a minute, we've got, my apologies, Christopher. I was wondering, I think your name sort of gave me a bit of a curiosity because it's not spelled the way we spell Christopher. Christopher has a very unique positioning as far as solar power is concerned. He's the CEO of PS Solar, and he's done quite a bit in Nigeria in particular as far as energy as a service is concerned. That's a very innovative solution, I believe, and I think he will be able to share some of his thoughts around how corporations can leverage this type of structuring to ensure that they have uninterrupted power supply and they're able to do their business without committing extensive capital. So what I will be doing is not directing questions in the immediate. I'll be inviting them to speak to you briefly so that we can get a feel of what they've been able to do, because I also want to be able to end this in time so that you can ask 1 or 2 questions from them and leverage on their experience. So I would quickly invite Robin to please speak to us about ports infrastructure and how we can resolve this particular challenge within the continent and in Nigeria in particular. Robin, over to you. Can we have that one slide? He has so much to say, so we had to sort of have a snapshot.
I got cut off in my prime. Right, I want to leave you this afternoon with 4 messages, okay? Number one, top left-hand corner. You look at all the collectively, the container terminals in North America and in Europe servicing a population of roughly 400 million, give or take. You then look at what's happening in West Africa with an equivalent population. 1/12 the capacity in West Africa compared with Europe or United States. And the problem we've got is that the population in West Africa will double by 2050 if you believe the United Nations numbers. Second point, Nigeria sends away or receives some 4 million containers a year out of that 8 million, yeah? But only 1.25 million actually come through Nigerian ports. Tinkan and Papa, roughly 1 million. Port Harcourt, 250,000. Lekki is going to be 2.6, yeah? So you've got 1,000 trucks a year passing from places like Lomé, Cotonou, Tema, Takoradi, or even Abidjan, belching out diesel fumes to keep the Nigerian economy ticking, yeah? Think of our green friends and what they will be thinking about having 1,000 wagons belching. Of course, that's not just pollution. It's an opportunity for theft. And of course, quite a lot of these lorries come through Niger, and that's a great area for smuggling. Number 3 problem. The size of container ships has doubled in 10 years. And those of you who read the news of a year or 18 months ago when that container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, that had 24,000 TEU on board it. Okay, so that's the sort of ship Nigeria needs to have regularly coming to Nigeria. But they need 22 meters of draft of water. Tinkan and Apapa, 12 meters. Lekki projected to be 16 meters. Yeah? So how do you compete economically when you can't get the economies of scale coming to the Nigerian or the West African coast? Okay, point 4. You have an opportunity, you have another problem in terms of Lekki. If you look at the picture taken in 2015, courtesy of Google Earth, and then you see here how the sand is built up along the breakwater. And I suspect Mr. Dangote is not getting very happy because, of course, this is his export terminal here. And the water's getting shallower and shallower where the sand builds up. And when it reaches that corner, where does the sand go? Into the approach channel. So they're going to have a huge problem, as with every other deep-sea port slated for Nigeria, in dredging. And let's just sort of put a peg in the ground. You know, the 2 dredgers going 24/7, keeping the Bonny Channel open for the LNG exports from Bonny. Yeah? That is the scale of the problem. So why am I here? Because our team, we believe that is not just a problem, but a huge opportunity. So all I want to say is please come up and see one of the projects we've got to address this issue on the floor above in PO7. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robin. Huge challenges present very great opportunities, and we can tell you from what everybody said that resolving the challenges in Nigeria is going to be a very great way to unlock the potentials that the economy offers. So over to you, Christopher. I would like you to speak a little bit to how you've been able to work with EAS and your innovative solutions for power.
Sure, thank you. And pleasure to be here, and great to see both a lot of Nigerians and non-Nigerians in the audience. So PAS Solar was founded 5 years ago, and I'm one of the co-founders and the chief exec. From the very beginning, we realized the massive, massive opportunity that is in energy access in Nigeria. And the company was really founded around that. There's been a lot of challenges and bumps over the last 5 years, not least related to the lacking port infrastructure. So I can definitely second that's been a bottleneck for us. Fundamentally, most of the solar equipment, so we work with solar PV technology, is brought in mostly from Asia, mostly from China. One of the things that we decided to do early on is to try to move the value creation locally. And what does that mean? And instead of always just importing it, actually servicing and repairing them locally. And this is great for not just for environmental purposes, but it actually is very, very capital efficient as well. And that reduces our reliance on bringing things in through the ports and all the challenges that are involved with that. I think the second thing is that the big advantage with renewable energy is that it is very low OPEX. So compared with genset, which is what Nigeria runs on at the moment, you have low capex, but you have very high OPEX. So that means that you're buying a cheap genset, and then you're spending a huge amount of money on the fuel bill. Now, what renewables does is flips that on its head. So you have a high upfront cost, and then you have close to zero OPEX going forward. And the challenge for a market like Nigeria is the lack of capital. And that's particularly acute when you're talking to smaller companies. I'm sure the multinationals can raise the capital abroad that they need for this. But for smaller companies, like the real challenges, the banking sector isn't able to serve them with this. So that's why we decided to, rather than selling this equipment, to what I call Uberize the whole model. So rather than selling solar panels and batteries, we actually doing it as a service. So that means that a company, an SME or micro business, or a household for that matter, so rather than buying the equipment, what they can do is they come to us and they effectively put it on a perpetual rent. And this actually brings down the problem of upfront capex. So it really lowers the barrier of entry for all of them. Now, why is this important, like also from a macroeconomic point of view? Is because energy is the big bottleneck for Nigeria. It is like air and water. Every part of the economy needs energy, and energy needs to be low cost, and it needs to be abundant. And the only way that Nigeria is really going to, get to that over the next 10 years, in my opinion, is through the renewables. So very keen to hear from anyone who's looking to deploy capital into this huge opportunity, as well as any partner. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Unlocking the opportunities, one of the challenges we've seen is that in structuring this, you have the fund providers being a bit worried because infrastructure is usually long tenured. But what we've been able to also see is that InfraCredit, under the management of Chinua, has been able to come up with some structured solutions. And I would like you, Chinua, to speak a little bit to that so that people can actually understand that long tenure and risk can actually be structured ab initio from the investment profile. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jumoke. It's a pleasure to be here. I think a lot of the sort of conversations that have been had today centers around the constraints around devaluation risk, currency risk, and constraints around, when you invest, how do you repatriate capital? And over the past few years, Nigeria has obviously experienced significant amount of capital depreciation as a result of FX devaluation. And this has also had an adverse impact on companies that are borrowing in dollars whilst the revenues are in naira. Now, InfraCredit was established as a specialized guarantee institution to provide credit guarantees, to mobilize local currency from domestic sources, long-term capital from pensions, insurance, and other local investors, and do this to help allocate long-term funding to these companies, thereby mitigating FX risk, but more importantly, helping the local pensions and insurance to diversify their portfolio, which is mainly held in government securities, into alternative assets. Over the past 5 years, we've helped companies, first-time borrowers in the capital market, to raise local currency finance in tenors of up to, firstly, 10 years was the first issuance we guaranteed in 2017. Subsequently, in 2019, we supported a 15-year bond issue. And last year, we also helped to lengthen the yield curve for corporate debt to up to 20 years. And this is largely held by local pension funds. About 19 pension funds have held most of these instruments. So I think what is very clear is that we do have a very fast-growing domestic pool of capital sitting with largely the pension funds, size about $35 billion, and growing at roughly about 15 to 18% per annum. And that's reflective of the demographic, so very young population, which also demonstrates that the tenor of financing can be long. And so I think for what we see as an opportunity potentially is where, as the earlier panel discussed around just innovation in helping to address currency risk, where investors can look at structures where their dollar can be held offshore and local financing can be sourced from the capital market and to help manage the FX risk. And even the last project the most recent 20-year we supported is the Lagos Free Zone, which operates an 800-hectare industrial park in Lekki that currently hosts the Lagos Deep Sea Port. And it's the first privately developed port infrastructure project in Nigeria. And they were able to raise 20-year financing, fixed rate from the capital markets, from local pension funds. So I think what is possible is tenors can go very long in local currency. Investors can hedge their risk in that regard. I imagine that should help sort of address some of the challenges we're seeing also in the renewable energy space. And so very recently, we helped a solar mini-grid company raise 7-year local currency financing from insurance companies as a result of, the guarantee essentially provides that payment cover, which essentially gives the instrument a AAA rating, which attracts these institutional investors that otherwise wouldn't have looked at that asset class. And so that, so what that means, again, when you look at it from how do we sort of help to promote renewable energy as a means of achieving energy transition in Nigeria. I mean, clearly, when you look at it from the broader opportunity, it's estimated that we need about $16 billion to connect about up to 600 communities that are not connected to the grid if we want to achieve universal energy access by 2030. So that's, again, pension funds can invest 35% of their assets as domestic credit to the private sector. That's about $10 billion. So there's a huge opportunity locally to allocate this capital. What is proving it is that it is possible. Now, to scale it up obviously requires strong network of actors. So the likes of developers that have track record, and then also innovative financial instruments that can help to unlock these pools of capital. So happy to take more conversations here.
Thank you so much, Chinua. Now, there were two issues that seemed to palpate through the room when we were discussing the investment opportunities. And I think that some of the solutions to the anxieties that investors might have is being seen in how credit enhancement is being deployed. But then, one of the challenges that we've also seen, which Chinua spoke to, is the fact that if you're looking to just the grid solutions to provide power, we have a lot of people that are left out of that particular space. And that requires people with innovative solutions to help us now serve the not mainstream. And that's what I think Doye would like to speak to. So Doye, over to you.
Hello. All right. So I think we can all agree that the grid in Nigeria is suboptimal. I think my colleagues have talked about that, and also the solutions that, or the alternatives to the grid, like diesel generators, petrol generators, are also designed to be backup and not optimal. Obviously, they're expensive to manage. They're not clean. And so we at Zola believe that distributed energy systems based on smart battery technology offer alternatives, affordable, clean alternatives to the grid. Okay? As we see, there are three main pillars to this problem that we're trying to solve. One of them is the technology, right, that allows renewable energy technology. The second is around integration, which Christopher's already talked about, and I believe William will talk about, and then lastly, financing. So from a technology perspective, we believe that you need smart modular technology that's networked with software that allows you to remotely manage and monitor these distributed energy solutions. That's where Zola comes in. In addition, you need integrators. So these are people like Christopher who install, or companies like Past Solar, who install distributed energy solutions. And I'll talk a bit about what I mean by that. And operate decentralized networks. Also, these companies are either large international companies who have presence in country, in market in Nigeria, or local operators. And lastly, in order to execute on this, you need financing to allow people, whether it's companies or residential customers, to afford power, and especially to increase the proliferation of renewable solutions. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have the financing structure in place to support various types of customers, whether it's through upfront purchase, credit lease, energy as a service, right? So that's also important. We are particularly focused on the technology part of the equation, as I had mentioned. So our solution is basically a smart battery solution, and what I mean by that is you have smart lithium batteries, solar panels, AC inverters, software to manage and control this, and also integration with other forms of power, not just solar panels and batteries, but also integration with the grid and generators. Okay, and so so that's kind of one. Two is from a technology perspective. We've built into our technology the ability to allow integrators such as Past Solar to install and manage their systems, or manage these networks that they're deploying in a very cost-effective and efficient manner. Also, building into the technology the ability to then finance the products. So, ability to remotely manage these assets so you can lock and unlock them, and that way you provide asset security and also provide the opportunity for people or other companies to finance these solutions. So that's where Zola is coming from. I'm happy to talk to people about the technology.
Thank you so much, Dre. And I would quickly move on to Williams. And the reason I want you to speak to, because everybody's worried, how is Africa faring? Can we actually begin to look at the objectives of the SDG goals that we have for the United Nations? Do we even have the ability to begin to put in solutions that can be clean and be in alignment with where we're going to with the world's direction in terms of clean energy? So do you want to speak a little bit to what you're doing at the moment, how you have been able to break it down and make it workable?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, I should say I'm not Manoj Sinha. Manoj is our CEO. He was supposed to be here this week, but couldn't make it, so I'm filling in. I think on a personal level, I have two sons. They're 17 and 20. I tell them every day, if I was your age, I would move to Africa tomorrow. Why do I say that? Because I moved to China when I was 20, and it was one of the most fascinating economic development stories that we've ever seen. And I think Africa is going to experience a similar type of development trajectory over the next 30 to 40 years. So I personally am super excited about what I'm doing in Africa, but also what our company is doing. And so what does Husk do? We build what are called either mini grids or microgrids, solar powered. We essentially lease land in a rural community. We put up solar arrays on the ground. We put in a control facility with batteries, inverters, and then we put up distribution and transmission lines to serve the communities, both households and businesses. And this is for the lifetime of the system, so 20 to 25 years. We're building energy infrastructure. We're like the grid, except we're much better than the grid. It's funny, I was just in Abuja, in Nasarawa, and all of the people in the cities were complaining that the communities that we serve in the countryside have better service than they do. Literally 24/7 power. I should say that we're also in a growth stage as a company. We started in India 15 years ago. We've proven our business model, and we're currently raising another $100 million, 40 of that in equity, which we hope to close by the end of the year. And the majority of that's going to go into Nigeria. Again, because we're very bullish about what the opportunity is in Nigeria, but also because the government and regulators have put in place a very robust framework for companies like us to be there over the long term. We wouldn't have gone in if that didn't exist. We went in because we also realized that as a standalone business, unsubsidized, Nigeria still offered a great opportunity for us. There are subsidy programs in place. We're happy to accept that subsidy, but Nigeria, as a standalone market, will work on its own. Nigeria also is very much, in favor of the private sector when it comes to energy infrastructure. So, I'd say that that's all the positive. There are a couple of challenges that I would also identify. One is that our business is very cost sensitive and our customers are very price sensitive. So anything that increases our costs makes the cost to the end user much higher. That cost in Nigeria is increased considerably because of logistics and importation. Our landed costs of components that we import into Nigeria are much higher than, for example, India. The logistics of taking it out of port to the site also considerably higher. And as a result, the cost of building a microgrid in Nigeria is about twice what it costs us in India. So, if there's an opportunity to reduce any of those costs, those savings get passed on to our consumer. It also is a major impact in terms of speed, right? We want to build 500 microgrids in Nigeria by 2026. We've currently built 15 over the last year, but we can't achieve that speed unless we can take care of some of those fundamental issues. The last thing I'll say is that, having been to Nigeria maybe 5 or 6 times, I'm based in Spain, but I cover India and Africa. It's not just an energy infrastructure problem. 2 stories that I think will resonate with people. One, we launched our first microgrid last year in Nasarawa. On the way back, we were feeling great, super pumped. And we passed through a town called Ibabo. And there was a guy with a cardboard sign standing by the road. The governor had just gone by before us, and the sign said what? It said, "We want roads." And I was like, yeah, exactly. You don't just want energy, you want roads, right? You want other infrastructure. And then last week when I was there, I was in another village, and we worked with a partner of ours to install a mobile telecom tower in the community where we built a microgrid. They had no cell coverage prior to us entering the market, and so they were 0G. And we were talking to some of the young guys there, and I know I'm done. And they said, we only have 3G. We want 4G, right? So it's like, there's all of these infrastructure problems that need an integrated solution. We're part of the solution, but we're not the only part, not the only solution. Thanks.
Okay, I know we're out of time. I had thought we would take questions, but we cannot. But I'm hoping that the exposition they've given you from a practical standpoint gives you an insight to the size and the amount of opportunities that exist in this space. And infrastructure can only unlock the value that we want from every other investment opportunities in Nigeria. Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.